So, our first speaker is Clark Martin. Most of you know Clark. He has been with the Federal Highway Administration in the area of workforce development for a very long time, and he is going to give us some insights from the Federal Highway Administration. Clark?
Thank you very much, Ernie. It is a pleasure to be here, and I also wanted to introduce Mike Burke, also from the Office of Professional Corporate Development with the Federal Highway Administration. Mike, give a hearty hi-yo silver there. He just did. Mike's title is Chief of Workforce Development and Partnerships in our office, and it's really Mike and I who I think focus more, or certainly as much as anyone else in Federal Highway, on workforce development. I, in fact, am the team leader for the affiliates program that incorporates the local technical assistance program, workforce development, and tries to provide some support to our Office of International Programs for international technology transfer. And Mike, I report to Mike, as does another team leader who manages the Eisenhower program. I've got about 15 minutes. Originally had a half an hour, but I gave up 15 minutes to Julius Rhodes, who you'll hear from after Teresa, to focus a little more specifically on the workforce, some of the attitudes and the demographics. I've got a little bit of that, but not much. I had heard a similar presentation by one of Mr. Rhodes' associates at TRB and thought, frankly, that he could use that additional time, and I think it will be time well spent. And that's the kind of guy I am. So I've only got about 15 minutes, and there are kind of three things I wanted to do. One is to give you a little bit of background, which I think most of you are already familiar with, or you wouldn't be here, and some of it I think Julius will cover as well, but not much. Thank you, Howard. And the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about the demographics and the baby boom generation retirement and all that is I've got a couple of graphics that kind of show a relationship between birth rates and the labor force workforce growth, which I thought was interesting. And then maybe one slide on concept. And then secondly, to talk a little bit about some things that are going on now in the workforce area at the national level. And I think for the most part, these are some good examples. There are other things certainly going on in the states and through NCHRP, but these are a couple that, or three or four maybe, that I thought would be of interest to you. And then finally talk about some things that we might consider as a transportation community going forward in how we address workforce development. And we're hoping, of course, as Ernie said and Teresa said, that and the Secretary said, that a lot of that comes out of these discussions. I think generally, most of us, I think, would agree that we've been talking about this workforce problem for several years now, and frankly, I think that's generated a recognition. There's been some contribution there, but the other part of it, obviously, has been what you've been experiencing in your own organizations. So the time has passed, really, to be talking about the workforce issue and really start thinking about and beginning to implement some implementable, actionable kinds of programs that will put in place the kinds of skills or opportunity for workers to develop the skills, have the skills, as well as that next generation of workers. That's about 5 minutes of my 15, so I think I better get started. Key workforce challenges, again, I think most of you are familiar with this. Baby boom generation retiring, fewer people going in transportation, competition from other workers, and a challenge of reaching women and minorities. I did read on the way up a publication by the American Council of Engineering Companies, which I thought was very good. It had a number of workforce articles, and out of 857,000 bachelor degree graduates in the country last year, only about 13,000 were women. So there's clearly an opportunity there who focused in the science and engineering area. So clearly there's a disproportionate relative to the overall graduates. Birth rates, as I talked about earlier, whoops. Well, am I glad that worked? I thought I had a laser here, but I don't, or I can't operate it. Just look there in the 1950s, 60s, and red dot on top. Probably it's my aim more than anything else. Oh, am I off there? Oh, thanks, Julius. Julius picked up on it since I put it right at his face to start. 1950-60, you can see a high birth rate. Obviously, that's the baby boom generation. We dropped down into the 60s and 70s, even and low point in 70s and 80s. And this is the workforce that obviously are moving into working age now and would be in the early 20s and a prime workforce entry. So there's a low drop there. And then retirements, hiring. And this was a slide that I think kind of corresponds. You can see in the 50s and 60s, this is the labor growth rate, labor force growth rate in the United States for these decades. And you can see, again, a low point in the 50s, 60s, a high point of 2.6% increase in the 70s and 80s, and then a steady decline, even to projections of 2000 to 2015 and then beyond, to relatively low labor force growth rates. This is a concept that Joe Toole had developed, and I know many of you know Joe. He was our Associate Administrator for Professional Corporate Development, and frankly, just a quick comment about Joe, I think the individual, and I would say frankly more than anybody else, who really focused on workforce development and transportation probably 8-10 years ago. Joe now has been asked by our new executive director, Jeff Bagnotti, who wanted to be here today, but frankly with all this discussion, as Frank alluded to in the stimulus package, the transition administration, he had to be in Washington. But this perfect storm concept of retirement, smaller hiring pool, new skill requirements are all coming together at this particular time, and obviously a real challenge for us in transportation. This was kind of a conceptual slide, again, that I would attribute to Joe, that lays workforce development out as a continuum, and starting there, obviously, with employment and the opportunities there, the college level, and not necessarily the college level. I know we're focused on transportation professionals, obviously at the university level, but there's a big segment of this workforce that has to be developed and managed in the technician and labor heavy equipment operators as well. There are challenges there in those areas. But then moving back into K-12, and I think our biggest challenge is where do we really intercede as a transportation community along that line. Clearly our biggest investment over time, and should be and will continue to be, in career development and professional development for career professionals, but at the same time focus more, as we're having discussions, and we'll have discussions over these next 2 days, about how we can align the needs of the transportation community with what we are, frankly, the service industry and what we're producing in our education system is going to be critical to our success. And I think one of the real challenges, again, not necessarily focus of our discussions today, but how far back into this K-12 area do we move, and what kinds of efforts do we undertake when we make those interventions? A couple of quotes from this magazine article about a new approach to recruitment shows students' cool side of engineering. And this was one comment I thought was particularly interesting relative to the K-12. The challenge then is not to get K-12 students to think about engineering, but to change the way they think about it. And one other one, I find a lot of students too often have no idea as to what engineering does. This is the chair of the ACEC California Student Outreach Committee. Once after we've shown them our outreach video to high school class, a student commented, "We hear a lot from our teachers about what we have to do to get into college, but they never talk about what we might do when we get out." And I don't know, and I think most of you would agree, we need to do a better job in talking to young people and students about the opportunities in transportation, to make them aware. It is a terrific the Secretary said, an exciting time, and it's going to be even more exciting with the challenges we have and the dependency, obviously, in this country for a viable, effective, safe transportation system. So to the extent we can continue those efforts, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those and what we can perhaps accomplish together in some of those areas. Very quickly, I've got about 5 minutes, and I've got a lot more to do, and I want to kind of scoot through this. And I do have a package of handouts that has a lot of this material in it that'll give you a lot more detail if you care to review that. I expected a Federal Express Saturday delivery. That's the bad news. The good news is there will be a Monday morning Federal Express delivery. So at the break or lunch or something, I'll hand that out. But let me go through these quickly. National Highway Institute, LTAP, Eisenhower Fellows, most of you are familiar with. Garrett Morgan, funds to develop training and education in an education grant program, and 5204E, which is an opportunity for state DOTs to use core funds for workforce development, expands the role of universities. One of the handouts I have is a list of the UTCs, and a number of them are represented here. Very quickly, the core funds, 5204E, of particular interest to state DOTs. My guess is most state DOTs are aware of this provision, safety lieu. The real advantage is it provides 100% federal funding for use of core funds, surface transportation, national highway system, interstate maintenance bridge, maintenance CMAC. I've got maintenance up there twice. I'll think of the other one in a minute. But in any event, advantage of 100% federal funding, and really broadens as well the way you can apply these funds. In T21, there was an availability to use 0.5% of STP to train state DOT workforce only. This expands it out dramatically. But again, at the discretion of the states, and competes with capital projects. Build roads, build bridges, fix highways, or use some of that money, and these are rather significant amounts of money, although there's an awful lot to be done. Witness the discussions in what the stimulus package might do for infrastructure in terms of investment in infrastructure. But nonetheless, the states do have that authority and availability. Education grant program goes to universities, but not to just develop university curriculum, but all areas of transportation development. Not a lot of money. 8 grants were provided, 3 partial grants, and 5 fully funded grants, and some very interesting developments in those areas of workforce. And again, the handout I have will explain some of those. One example, North Dakota State, Denver Tolliver is here, working on an online technician training program. Maryland State Highway Administration has a partial grant through the University of Baltimore to develop a workforce in several key areas, maintenance included, that might be of interest to other states. University of Iowa is focused on developing specific curriculum in 5 high interest area, high needs area in transportation. University of Vermont is working with New Hampshire and Maine state DOTs to focus on developing their maintenance program. So I'll have that handout later in the day. Garrett Morgan, significance here, the first time since 1997 the program was established, but Safety Lieu provided some money. Focuses on K-12. Transportation Opportunity Scholarship Program, hardly worth the slide. It was an effort to allow the U.S. DOT operating administrations, FRA, FTA, and others, FHWA, to work together, but to contribute to a scholarship program, a bit political at the time, allows for private sector participation, but in U.S. DOT we haven't managed that at all, and there hasn't been any other funding. But there may be, at least there's a framework there if the community wanted to proceed with it. UTC's got a handout there. Most of you are familiar with the UTC program, dramatically increased from T21 to Safety Lieu. Here is a project of particular note, and I would think perhaps the one that could, if it's managed properly, make as much of a contribution as anything else I've shown yet today. A state DOT workforce toolkit that is a National Cooperative Highway Research Project, NCHR NCHRP, and really it is a collection of best practices. It'll be an online practice. Mickey is here from Missouri. She's been involved in that, and her committee, the AASHTO Human Resources Subcommittee, is really taking the lead here. So if the states contribute, you know that old phrase, if we build it, they will come. Well, let's see. We need to build this first, make the contributions. Every meeting that I've been to at AASHTO, and many meetings you've been to, and some discussion here, how do we really understand what other states are doing, the best practices? Well, here's an automated web-based opportunity to do that, and then AASHTO is going to maintain it. But we've got to get good information in and allow the states to use that. I am, by my watch, 30 seconds, Ernie, maybe less, and I've got 2 slides left. One is some strategic concepts, and there are 6 here. Frankly, Mike, if I could be so bold, it was Mike Burke, me, and some consultants who thought very carefully, dreamed these up based on some priorities that we thought were important, and we think there's value here. An internship program. If you looked at some of the material that Ernie and Teresa and Jason have developed and through the surveys, more states are getting more focused on internship programs. Very good opportunities there. Community colleges. I know not necessarily the focus here, but how can community colleges contribute more to transportation workforce development? Downsized industries, we certainly hear about a lot about that. 530,000 citizens lost their jobs last month. Are there opportunities in our business to move them in? There's some potential through Department of Labor, but at the same time, that economic recession is affecting our income as well, with fewer people driving miles and increased energy efficiency, so on. Participation to promote STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. More in the K-12 area, obviously. Visibility, attractiveness of transportation careers, going back to that quote I read from the magazine earlier. Really, how well do young people understand our business, and do we make it not exciting? I think exciting is a part of it, but just provide them with the opportunities available to them in transportation. I would say if you ask most high school students what they thought a career in transportation was, they would say bus or truck driver, because I've asked them and that's what they've told me. Make transportation workforce an outstanding work environment. I'm not going to take the time to go through some of the things that could contribute to this, but this is going to be individual organizations and best practices that could do the best in that area. Finally, our office, and we're going to work with key partner organizations to focus on strategy 1 and 2. A broader-based, and that really means more engagement of an internship program, and make it a valuable, worthwhile intern program for students and for the organization. One quick example, North Dakota State has a design center where they actually, at the state DOT, have North Dakota State students do DOT work. Not anything, frankly, that's going to raise eyebrows in the consulting engineering community, but nonetheless work that these students can expect to do should they move on to work at the North Dakota Department of Transportation. And there's 2 benefits there. They get, obviously, all of them good experience, and frankly, as I understand it, Denver, the North Dakota DOT is looking at those students and deciding ones that the students that they want to pursue as possible employees. Community colleges, an opportunity. We're going to be meeting with the Association of Community Colleges on Monday, as a matter of fact, and explore what they're doing and see if we can get a little sharper alignment. So that's my presentation. Maybe 2 minutes over, Ernie, and I apologize for that, but I think that's the real key for us. And those labor and birth rates and those issues are actually, and the short term is going to be affected by recession. And we're in the most difficult economic times, most would agree, since the Depression. They're going to be affected by those peaks and valleys. But these are longer term issues for us in transportation. We make investment now in middle school, high school, even the universities. We're talking 3, 4, 8, 10 years out before those students will come into the industry. And how do we do a better job keeping our current workforce at the cutting edge with the new technologies. Last thought I'll leave you with, again, it was Joe Toole, and he said at one point, one that I remember, frankly remember a lot of things that Joe said, even when we reach out to students, and if they don't move into the transportation career, into a transportation career at these, and we reach out to them at these younger ages, they're going to be users of the system. And they're going to have to be making decisions as we push some of those decisions down and we reach out more to the communities about transportation decisions. And they'll be a better informed citizenry. And even to the point where when we start talking about investment in infrastructure, they'll understand a little more about our transportation system, we think, and be in a better position to make decisions and be better users of the transportation system. And that is my last slide. Thank you, Ernie.